presentation notes. In this talk, I'm going to take advantage of the more informal nature of a SkeptiCamp to get your take on a few questions I've been wondering about for a very long time, and see what you think of my conclusion. To introduce the topic, consider this question. What is the Dunning-Kruger effect? Anybody think they know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is?
Yeah.
I know everything about the Dunning-Kruger.
Correct answer.
And that is the kind of answer I'm talking about. So if you do a Google search on Dunning-Kruger, we find a bunch of images like these. All of them have the same general shape, a steep rise to what is commonly referred to, I think on one of these, as Mount Stupid, which is a little condescending, let's say, followed by a shallower decline into a valley, often called the valley or pit of despair. And then you rise up to actual competence. But you'll notice that one of these images is different. It's got two lines that are basically straight at a slight angle to each other. That's that one. And that matches the figures from Kruger and Dunning's original paper. And no, I didn't make a mistake and reverse the order of the authors. They are listed as Kruger and Dunning on the paper. I'd guess because the student Kruger did most of the work and the professor Dunning did the supervising. I'm not sure why the effect got the names the other way around. That's one of the four figures from the original paper. Notice there is no Mount Stupid, no matter what you name it. It does have the same general result, which is that someone's perceived ability is, if you're below the top quartile, is higher than their actual test score, and the deviation gets smaller as you learn more. But it's not at all what I suspect everyone in this room thought the Dunning-Kruger effect was, right? So, why? Most of the treatments of the Dunning-Kruger effect that I've run across are wrong. Dunning-Kruger does not manifest in people with little actual knowledge, thinking that they know more than experts. Those people clearly exist, sometimes facetiously, but it's a different thing. Some people call this the super Dunning-Kruger effect, but I don't think that there's a universally recognized term for it. And yes, me thinking something about a topic where I have precisely zero expertise is not really meaningful, so I did ask a real psychologist about this. Perhaps it's an example of the meaning of a term changing or having different meanings in different contexts. There's another example of this, also from psychology. What does it mean for a skill to have a steep learning curve? Anybody brave enough to tell me what it means to have a steep learning curve? So you have all learned not to raise your hand. Excellent. So let's imagine that I wasn't really lazy and I labeled the horizontal axis number of attempts and the vertical axis degree of success. So we have three different learning curves here. The green learning curve, the red learning curve, and the blue learning curve. In the case of the green learning curve, you try, but you don't succeed much until you catch on and you get up to full proficiency. The red is it's pretty even, and the blue is you learn it really well at the beginning, and then you eventually taper off. Which one of those is a steep learning curve.
I guess it just depends on which one which part of it you're looking at.
It depends on which part of it you're looking at. So then that is the correct answer. So in common speech, steep learning curve means it's difficult to learn. In the psychology of learning, where the term originates, it addresses a different question. Is the learning curve even, or does it have a steep part? And interestingly enough, where the learning curve is steep, that's the part where you're getting this stuff the quickest, where it's the exact opposite of what everyone thinks the phrase means. So this is a slide from an actual paper in the psychology of learning. You learn slowly, you make steep progress, and then you plateau. So it isn't a question of easy or hard. It's a question of when in the process of learning do you make the most gains. This could again be different meanings in different contexts, which is another talk I want to give if I'm ever brave enough to give it. Here are the basic questions I'd like to talk about. If a question isn't right, is it always wrong? Does it matter? Some examples are clearly a problem. Who agrees with that statement? mRNA COVID vaccines caused more deaths than saved in this study. And this is it must be true. It was posted on Instagram.
Oh, good. Now I believe it.
So that's easy. That one's not right. It is wrong, and it certainly does matter. Even easier is the related assertion that the vaccines caused more deaths than COVID itself, which was another claim that was running around and still is, which I chose not to give any prevalence by putting it up on the screen or looking at it again. Let's look at a couple of ones related to recent stories. I frequently heard that free speech is our most important right. That's the reason it's the First Amendment. Anybody heard of that before?
Yeah.
First Amendment, because it's so important, that's why they made it first. Funny thing happened when I tried to find when I tried to find a good example of this. Google's AI overview made exactly the error I wanted to point out. The statement, First Amendment is first because it is the most important. This statement is a common misconception. Yes. The First Amendment isn't called first because it's the most important, but simply because it was the First Amendment proposed in the Bill of Rights. Wrong. The First Amendment is and so forth. So why is that statement wrong? So the Bill of Rights, a document that I had the pleasure of seeing in the National Archives, has 12 items, not 10. This shocked me when I first saw it. I mean, it's sitting there under glass in the rotunda of the National Archives, looking all old and faded, and this is the real thing. I thought there were only 10, but the document had 12 proposed amendments. 11 are now part of the Constitution. The first 10 were ratified in 2 years. The Bill of Rights came out in 1789. The first 10 were ratified in 1791. And those are what is usually referred to as the Bill of Rights. The last one to be ratified took more than 200 more years. So it was ratified 203 years after it was proposed. The only one not ratified had a formula that determined the size of the House of Representatives. if passed, the House would currently have, anyone want to guess how many members?
1,000?
Hundreds of thousands.
6,629, which seems like too many. It's certainly more than would fit in the House chamber, which is what determined the current number of 435. What we know is the First Amendment was the first of the original 12 that passed in the first group of 10. It was third in the original document, which is kind of ironic because the Third Amendment is the one you never hear about. Who knows what the Third Amendment is?
Commerce?
It forbids housing of troops in your home during times of peace and only allows it under specific laws in time of war. So not a deal. This completely negates the claim that it's first because it's most important. So it's clearly not right. But is it wrong? Does it matter? When people hear it's the First Amendment because it's the most important, that's wrong. It misrepresents why they were put in that order. It misrepresents possibly what the authors were thinking when they set the document up. But does that matter? Food for thought. Here's another one. Why didn't Trump lower the flag on the deaths of Jimmy Carter and John McCain? This came up a couple of times in news reports and the like, usually on the left, after Charlie Kirk died. I couldn't quickly find any examples of this, likely because, wow, that's touchy. Likely because they were removed and changed pretty quickly. Because Trump did order the flags removed on the death of John McCain after significant public pressure to do so. Lower, thank you. And that's another thing that happens. You may have noticed during Susan's presentation, she talked about SkeptiCamps being a good place to attack science and science education. It's really easy to misstate things, even under not so tense situations. So, the flags were lowered for John McCain. Why didn't Trump order flags lowered when Jimmy Carter died?
Didn't he?
No, he didn't.
Need to order it probably?
No, he wasn't the president. It's just, it was that the other old guy. But there was an issue, and that was whether or not Trump ordered the flags lowered at Mar-a-Lago, which is a little bit less important. Again, clearly not right, but is it wrong? Yeah, doesn't matter. Well, it makes Trump look like more of a jerk.
Yeah.
So is that automatically good? Many of us, looking at the shirt I'm wearing and the hat I have in my car that says "Make America Think Again," you might think I would jump on any opportunity to make Trump look like an idiot. But no. So my hobby has been astronomy since the 3rd grade. As a result, I see a lot of nonsense about space on Facebook. So in most of the images I've put up, I try to hide the source. I did show that one was from Instagram, but that doesn't really tell you much. So this lovely post tells us that in 100 years, we've never seen a solar eclipse like this. 6 minutes of total darkness. Get ready for the spectacle. First of all, during a total solar eclipse, it is not totally dark. You can see parts of the sky in areas where the eclipse is not total. So the illumination is at the darkest is about as bright as a full moon night. So nowhere near total darkness. But 6 minutes isn't how the longest that a solar eclipse can be. So I saw this post, and it's talking about an eclipse coming on August the 2nd, 2027. It is the longest total solar eclipse I will have the opportunity to see. But it's not the longest for 100 years. I mean, what does that mean? The 100-year span surrounding today? 100 years in either direction? Which one does it mean? Well, either way, it's wrong. Because there was an eclipse on July 11th, 1991, which I went to Hawaii to see, and watched the partial phases of that, and 30 seconds before totality, the sun went into a cloud, and it stayed covered through all of totality and left about a minute after. So I saw everything but totality. That pissed me off. And it turns out that there eclipses come in what are called serocycles every 18 1/3 years. Essentially the same eclipse repeats. The longest one in this serocycle was 2 eclipses before 2027, before 1991. And that one was 7 minutes long. Which is, yeah, but it was in the 1950s, and I wasn't able to convince my parents to drive to it. Don't remember where it was. I think it was in Indonesia. So driving to Indonesia would have been a problem. Plus, I was 3, so no. Anyway. Now, on Facebook, there are lots of images of solar eclipses. Your feed is not what mine is. Have any of you ever seen these?
No.
So here is an image claimed to be a picture of the most recent 2024 solar eclipse. Here's another image.
Gosh, I remember that.
Here's another image. Here's another image. This one is labeled the best photograph of total solar eclipse at totality. Here's another image.
Oh my goodness.
How many of these are real?
None. What do you say you measure the word real? What do you mean?
How many of these are actually photographs, heavily processed, of a total solar eclipse?
Heavily processed.
How about this one?
No.
Nope, not at all. How about this one?
Maybe.
This is the best photograph of the total solar eclipse at totality, and it's completely fake. The corona, the part of the solar atmosphere outside, does not have these big swooping curves in it. Just doesn't happen ever. How about this one?
No.
This is the real one.
Seriously?
Yeah, so this is the eclipse from 2017. I went to Casper, Wyoming to see this one. It was spectacular. And if you looked at it naked eye, you would not see this. What you saw naked eye was more spectacular because there's a huge brightness gradient that is completely hidden by this. Your eye is able to see contrast ratios that far exceed anything that any digital system can display. No one thinks this one's real, and it's the only real one.
So
And of course, this one's clearly fake.
one of those things coming up is
And you notice they're not curved; they're not big swooping curves, which is the giveaway that the other one was fake. So this is part of what's called the corona, and the ribbons are constrained to follow the path of the local solar magnetic field. And you can learn an awful lot about how the sun works in its magnetic field by looking at pictures like this.
That's super huge, right? Because that's like,
Yeah, so the sun is a little less than 1 million miles across. So these coronal streamers are millions of miles long.
And is there a special filter that you put on the camera to get that picture?
No, no filter at all. This is done with a very, very aggressive HDR treatment, where what you want to be able to do is get this area, which is tens of thousands of times brighter than this area at the same time. That, by the way, is a naked eye star, which I could not see naked eye, but at night, that's a bright star. It's the brightest star in the constellation Leo the Lion. It's Regulus. For those that care. Anyone else? Yeah, anyway, okay. A recent video from a very well-respected and extremely popular YouTube channel looked into glyphosate. Unfortunately, and this is a still from that video, and glyphosate is marketed by, or was marketed by, anybody know? Monsanto, the dreaded Monsanto, with this giant looming M in the cornfield, which, this is a still from the video. This section is called the Monsanto Papers, so it's clearly all fake. And it was accompanied with really, really dire music, because this is bad, bad stuff. Unfortunately, a big chunk of the video was based on highly distorted, and I'm going to put it in quotes, information from a person with a long history of such information. I'm not going to go into the details. The details are in a recent podcast by a skeptical hero of many in this room, Kevin Folta. Videos like this increase public fear of what was a far less dangerous pesticide than the alternatives. That's a problem. It isn't right, it is wrong, and it does matter. Now, the claims that glyphosate is as safe as water are wrong, but the idea that you'd rather use glyphosate than any of the other pesticides that were available at the time was even more incorrect. So here's another example from a source that most of you would consider reliable. An example of the tu quoque logical fallacy. Anybody happen to remember off the top of their head, no Googling, what tu quoque means? Yes, sir.
Isn't it the U2 fallacy?
And so can you give me an example of when that would be appropriate?
Or like if you criticize my shirt, and I'd say like, well, yours has a stain on it.
That's very good. So another example would be, you smoke, therefore you can't argue that smoking is bad. So this was posted up on Facebook by a very prominent person. You'll notice I'm not saying who any of these people are. You can ask me later.
Okay.
Anybody?
What about ism?
So, is this right? Is it wrong? What's the word? Any ideas?
I've never heard of the two-cake fallacy.
Okay, first of all, it's spelled wrong.
Yeah.
It's T-U for two,
For you.
not T-O. It is nothing like whataboutism. It is correct to call it a form of ad hominem. It is not the same as a red herring. And it has nothing to do with accusations as the initiation. It's just wrong. Well, at least it isn't right. But is it wrong? the fact that it's misspelled is kind of trivial. But does it matter? Is it an indication that likely most of the rest of this information is wrong as well? It's not a guarantee. All of us misspeak, misspell, mistype. The O isn't all that far from the U on the typewriter. Oh, sorry, keyboard. Not everyone's as old as I am. So, is it right? No. Is it wrong? Maybe. Should it be addressed? Even more questionable. In a recent talk by someone that many of us in this audience consider a reliable source about Area 51, it was stated that they were MiGs tested at Area 51. This was during the Vietnam War when the US Air Force had to go up against the MiGs that North Korea had. And it was stated that these MiGs were ones that Israel had gotten from Russia, and Russia sold them to the US. Any ideas about that? This could not happen.
Sounds unlikely.
It did not happen, and it could not happen. Why not?
Israel didn't exist?
Israel did exist. Israel wouldn't send MiGs to Israel because of the close relationship with the US. The way Israel got the MiGs was during a war with Syria, where they blew up the airport. One MiG survived, they landed and flew it back to Israel, and then sent it to the US. So it was a MiG that Israel sent to the US. But the story's wrong. And the whole structure of international politics that is important for understanding this negates the entire possibility. So certainly not right, maybe wrong. Is it worth calling out? Oh, and by the way, it wasn't Russia. At the time, it would have been the USSR. In the same talk, there was a Q&A that drifted into the wider topics around UFOs and the bizarre claims by someone by the name of Bob Lazar. Anybody heard of this guy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is being recorded, so I won't call him a classic nutcase. Oh, sorry.
I'm glad you did that.
I wouldn't.
You'd never call.
I would not do that. That would be rude.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. So there were questions about Bob Lazar's claims about element 115, which at the time had not yet been discovered. And the presenter said that Lazar described element 115 as a perpetual motion machine that would produce free energy because although it was radioactive, it somehow decayed in such a way as to make more element 115, which is not the way any radioactive decay works. But it's also not what Bob Lazar said. What he said, which was differently crazy, was that element 115 was stable, that it fell into the then hypothesized island of stability for large nuclei, which either doesn't exist or is much higher up the periodic table than we've ever gotten. And he said that when you fire certain particles at element 115, it produces an antimatter or anti-gravity field, which is what allowed UFOs to hover. And yes, covering your face is an appropriate reaction to this. This is wacky. And that's why you use it for a UFO. So it's not stable. This thing doesn't happen. And there's no anti-gravity field that you can get, we think, from a phenomenon that doesn't exist. So it's nonsense. But it's so far from the claim that was actually made. This isn't even a straw man. It's just wrong. Not right. Certainly wrong. But does it matter? Bob Lazar made a nutty claim about element 115. Here's another nutty claim about element 115. And they're nutty claims, they're all interchangeable, right? Maybe. So did this presenter intend to present incorrect information? Almost certainly not. I base this on my familiarity with their work and other mistakes in the Q&A. My favorite was talking about element 115 as it is now known to actually exist. I'm talking about the isotopes of element 115. The longest one that stays, the longest, its half-life is, I want to say, 200 microseconds. That's very close, if not correct. That's verbatim from what he said in the talk. The correct figure is more than 2,000 times longer, half a second. Turns out that almost every assertion made in the video about element 115 is not right. But are they wrong? Does it matter? Does it matter if at one point he said every isotope has a half-life in the picoseconds, and then a few minutes later he said the longest has a half-life of 200 microseconds, which is wrong because it's actually 500 milliseconds, or half a second. Is it wrong?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Another factor that goes into this is the way one feels about the topic or the source. So most of the things I've mentioned come from very trusted or highly popular people for this group. And if I told you the names, you'd recognize them. And some people may already know one of them. This is a pretty good clue if you've been watching Susan's videos. How many of you heard the claim about Trump stating that drug prices were going to drop by 1,000%?
Yes. 600, 900, 500.
And in fact, he went up as high as 1,600%, which is kind of funny. And you get fact checks like this. Trump's mathematically impossible promise to cut drug prices by 1,000%. And yes, Trump's statement was mathematically impossible. But people make statements like this pretty often.
Yeah.
All they've done is invert the statement that the old price was 1,000% higher than the new price, so it's dropping by 1,000%. It's not so bad. In fact, sometimes they even come out in print. Sometimes they're published in reputable journals. Here we have the IEEE transaction on transportation electronics, the last sentence, considering emissions on an hourly basis, up to approximately 1,000% reduction in carbon monoxide emission is observed. These guys didn't get pilloried on CNN.
Right.
Why?
Because it was Trump.
No one read it.
It's wrong. Well, lots of people read it. Not as many as heard about it on CNN. But that's not why CNN didn't talk about it. And the reason many of us care more about this idiotic statement by Trump is because it's by Trump. And truth, to me, doesn't matter as far as the source. It's the statement's veracity that matters. Period. So I'm sure lots of you have seen this.
No.
Teflon is harmful. Teflon is an example of a PFAS, and I won't go into what PFAS stands for because it won't help you unless you already know it. And these are often called, well, you've heard the name, forever chemicals. So that's a problem for two reasons. First, there are so many possible chemicals that fall into the category that, in my opinion, grouping them together invites tremendous misrepresentation. It is like the term organic. As a result of the naturalistic fallacy and other effects, most people think organic means
Natural.
safe.
Oh.
If we mean organic, as in organic farming, we find substances like copper sulfate listed as an organic pesticide, despite being both quite toxic and bioaccumulative. And I should be more precise there. It accumulates in the soil, not in the plant. Or we could mean organic as in organic chemistry. Anybody know what it means in chemistry to be organic? Has a carbon atom, period. That's all you need to be organic, have a carbon atom. And carbon atoms are important. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing organic chemistry for that definition, but it doesn't mean what most people think it means. It doesn't mean biological. It means contains carbon. So the lovely compound that immediately comes to mind for me as a, quote, organic compound that is not particularly safe is hydrogen cyanide. 3 atoms, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon. So clearly being organic in the common uses of the word means essentially nothing. Like organic, PFAS encompasses so many compounds, you can't tell much about them from that label. And the persistence of these chemicals is not the important source of their danger when that danger exists. There are lots of very dangerous compounds that don't last as long as PFAS do. But they last long enough that they will build up in the environment and they will kill you. A really great example of that only lasts in the environment for a few decades instead of PFAS, which will last a few centuries. Dioxin. Everybody's heard of dioxin. Do not drink dioxin. Bad. Do not get dripped on by anything with dioxin in it. Bad. And there are lots of compounds that last even longer in the environment than the most toxic PFAS, but they're not toxic, like silicon dioxide. Anybody know what silicon dioxide is?
Sand. Glass.
Quartz, which is it's used to make glass, and it's one of the most common minerals in all the rocks on Earth. The most persistent PFAS in that group is Teflon itself. However, Teflon is not dangerous. Period. Full stop. The molecule that Teflon is the brand name of, and again, I won't give it because it's not going to help, is so big it can't be absorbed biologically, and it has very short lifetimes in the body as a result. So you eat it and just poop it out. If you drink it, you just pee it out. Teflon was produced using some very nasty chemicals, including PFOA, which is one of the most toxic of the PFAS, at least one of the most toxic ones that shows up in the environment. But there was never any PFOA in the final Teflon product. So that doesn't matter. But most importantly, Teflon production hasn't used PFOA for more than a decade. So it never mattered, and it doubly doesn't matter. So this image isn't right. I contend it is wrong, but we can discuss that. Does it matter? Should it be addressed? There's so much emotion now about PFAS, forever chemicals, and you think forever means dangerous. The next time you hear forever, think glass. Lasts longer than PFAS, probably more of it in the environment. Don't worry about it, because it's not a danger. Or consider this still, from a video on statistics, going into detail about the difference between the standard deviation formulas for a population and a sample. I looked at this and my head spun, because there are 7 muffins on this slide, not 6.
Oh,
And I'm just going, what the? Huh? No, the mean is calculated from the 7 muffins, because there are 7 of them. Everyone agree that there are 7? Everyone agree that 7 is not 6?
yeah.
Okay, so we're on firm ground here. So the point that was being made at this part of the video was that this is what's called an overdetermined problem. There are actually 8 numbers specified on this screen. 7 for the values of the size of all of the muffins, and the yellow line, which is the mean, that's 8, for which there are 7 inputs, which means if you're given the mean, there are 6 degrees of freedom. So if you removed any of them, you could recompute the previous one. And that turns out to be the reason for the difference between the formulas for a sample and a group. So I understood eventually what was meant by this graphic, but while watching the video, it struck me like, what the hell? So here's an example where it isn't right, but it isn't wrong. And that's almost in a good way. So I recently watched a discussion between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ezra Klein had written a editorial for the New York Times where he made the assertion, which I will not characterize, that Charlie Kirk did politics the right way. And Ta-Nehisi Coates disagreed. But they're friends, and Coates was invited onto Klein's podcast, and they had an hour-long discussion about it. And they covered lots of topics, and it took a lot of self-control not to give any examples of both pro and anti-Kirk's wildly misrepresenting his words and clear intent. But one of the topics was about the crossing of political lines, as in, where is the line? For me, the line is truth. The truth is the most important thing. If we don't accept reality, we don't have a common basis for any discussion. I acknowledge that I'm usually what is called a pedant. Thanks for agreeing, Susan. However, in these times, I see pedantry as immunizing oneself against one of the biggest dangers of our time. This was highlighted 5 years ago by the RAND Corporation. Everybody know who the RAND Corporation is? Big think tank, often used by government agencies, in particular the military, very adamantly non-partisan. Rand's paper about truth decay came out in 2018. Even then, the corrosive effects were clear. Now, they're overwhelming. Here's the first paragraph from that paper. Remember, this was written in 2018. Over the past 2 decades, national political and civil discourse in the United States has been characterized by truth decay, defined as a set of 4 interrelated trends. an increasing disagreement about facts and analytical interpretation of facts and data, a blurring of the line between opinion and fact, an increase in the relative volume resulting influence of opinion and political information, and lowered trust in formally respected sources of factual information. These trends have many causes, but for this report, we'll focus on 4. Characteristics of human cognitive processing, such as cognitive biases, changes in the information system, including social media and the 24-hour news cycle, competing demands on the education system that diminish time spent on media literacy and critical thinking, and polarization, both political and demographic. The most damaging consequences of truth decay include the erosion of civil discourse, political paralysis, alienation and disengagement of individuals from political and civic institution, and uncertainty over national policy. Written in 2018. If it is possible, is it possible for a desire to pay attention to these things to become an overwhelming need to pick nits? Sure. But the alternative is, at least in my view, the current situation where vaccines are controversial, flat Earth is promoted by public figures, and lies are accepted by a terrifyingly large proportion of our population. Thanks for listening. Do we have time for questions, discussions? Please do not throw eggs.
You know, when you're talking about the PFAS, have you looked into the issue of PFAS being on dental floss and whether there's a problem there or not?
No, it is on dental floss. I'm pretty sure it's Teflon,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Teflon's fine. Come on, you gotta have a.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, sir.
Does Teflon break down to toxic things and
No.
kind of irrelevant?
Under high heat, it does.
So, right, so under high heat, Teflon breaks down. But under high heat, everything breaks down eventually. The temperature at which Teflon breaks down is much lower than the temperature at which, say, silicon dioxide breaks down. And under those conditions, it's no longer Teflon. It forms something else, which is one of the other reasons that the phrase forever chemical means nothing. Anybody know why forever chemicals are called forever chemicals?
Marketing.
No. There's a very good chemical reason for it. There's a very good reason from the chemistry. So the P in PFAS, actually, it should be 2 P's. Per and polyfluoro, that's the F. PFAS are substances where all of the hydrogens in normal
Valence.
carbohydrates or what are called alkanes are replaced by fluorines. And the carbon-fluorine bond is enormously stronger than the carbon-hydrogen bond. So those bonds last forever. That's what it's talking about. And there are still carbon-carbon bonds. And there are other things that are attached to these that aren't part of that original alkane. And those are still just as chemically active as they used to be. So only a particular kind of bond in a forever chemical is forever. And if you're an organic chemist, that makes perfect sense. How many organic chemists in the audience?
Well, I've taken a little. Yeah, I've
And
taken
I've taken some organic chemistry, but I'm not going to raise my hand. So, yeah, is it right to call it a forever chemical? It's a great name, and it caught on in the subsection of the population that wants to talk about how incredibly dangerous these things are. when you hear something that you think is sketchy, check it. When you hear something that supports your previous views, check it twice as hard, because you're more likely to be fooled by nonsense.
But by the way, you were saying, what is the heat, if your pan's really hot,
Right?
can Teflon break down?
Yes.
So then the question becomes, what about the breakdown compounds, if any of those are dangerous? So the notion Teflon may be fine,
Right.
but the pans may not be.
So in normal usage, that doesn't happen. You would have to get the pan up to almost red hot.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
You have to like put it dry on your burner and turn it on.
All the
and
way.
Leave it, and it'll start smoking. And that smoke is like toxic fumes.
Right.
But under normal conditions, yeah. it won't.
Yeah.
So don't do that?
So don't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna make a
So
note.
when we're looking for, verification, how do we know what?
But just ask me. No, I'm joking. That was a joke. No, it's really hard. What you have to do is, so my go-to for any of these things are large international scientific organizations.
And yet IEEE had that 1000% figure.
Right, so that's not wrong. That's my point. It isn't wrong. That was just a way of viewing things that made the number look bigger. It's not wrong. It's just a different way of wording it.
It's
Yeah,
a weird way of saying a factor of 10.
exactly. It's a really weird way of saying a factor of, well, 100, but yeah. But, yeah,
1000%.
Yeah.
yeah. So you may be right. I'm not gonna try and do it in my head. Yeah, so, yeah, it's not wrong. It's just misleading. And gee, when has anyone ever tried to mislead someone?
And why?
Well, you know why? People try to mislead other people because they want to be right and they want their message to get across. And the more emotional you can make it, the more likely it is to be remembered, and the more likely it is to result in changes of activity. Thanks.
It was,